Hello and welcome everybody to our webinar series on survivor-centered policing in West Africa. It's very nice to have you all with us today. Before we start, I would like to ask all of you to go down to the menu and choose the globe for interpretation that is showing up, and choose your language, either English or French, so that you can hear this webinar in your own language. It is important that you do choose a language, and then that you mute also the original audio, and then that you stay in that channel. Bonjour tout le monde, si vous nous rejoignez depuis un pays francophone, nous sommes ravis de vous voir. Je voudrais vous demander de choisir votre langage en bas sur le globe. Choisissez le français et restez dans le français pendant tout le webinaire. Et mutez original audio, s'il vous plaît. So, Jerry, I actually hear you as you're speaking, although I had muted. But I guess I will, that's only because I'm in the English channel. Okay, let's see. Excellent. Okay, so I hope you have all chosen your language. Please also verify your name, and we would love for you to put your name and your organization to your profile so that we know a little bit where you're coming from. Please also make sure to stay on mute. My colleague Melissa will make sure everybody stays on mute because we have quite a few people in the room and we want to make sure that we hear our speakers. This session will be recorded. And we hope you all agree to that. If not, then please, at least you know it is being recorded, so you can just observe and not talk during the session. That's certainly an option. Thank you so much for being with us. So my name is Deborah Mancini. I'm the director for Africa at PartnersGlobal. We are an international non-governmental organization based in Washington, D.C. And for more than 30 years, we have been working together with local civil society organizations to create more peaceful, equitable, just, and resilient societies. We have founded a network of over 19 partner centers that are all independent organizations, and we collaborate with these centers via different mechanisms to achieve our joint goal, which is to transform conflict and promote democratic values. Today's webinar is held under our project Promoting Survivor-Centered Policing in West Africa that we have been implementing with two other partner network centers, the Rule of Law and Empowerment Initiative, also known as Partners West Africa Nigeria, and Partners West Africa Senegal. And we are very lucky to have the generous support of the Ford Foundation for this project, and we thank them for that. We would also like to thank Partners West Africa Nigeria, and especially Executive Director Kemi Okenyodo for her leadership and support in putting together this event. Partners West Africa are a long-standing trusted partner for us, and we really appreciate this opportunity to collaborate. Gender-based violence is widely spread in Africa. As a matter of fact, some studies say that the region is among the worst affected in the world, only superseded maybe by Central Africa. As first responders, the police can have a significant impact in the prevention and reduction of gender-based violence. The goal of our joint efforts on survivor-centered policing is to look at how the police in West Africa currently responds to gender-based violence and come up with recommendations for best practices that will enhance the response and focus it more on the needs of survivors. During the first phase of the project, Partners West Africa Nigeria and Partners West Africa Senegal have collected data each in 7 different localities, and they have published comprehensive reports with their findings and recommendations, which we recommend all of you to read. This webinar series serves to disseminate some of the findings. And so last week we looked at some particularities of the police response in Senegal. Today we're focusing on Nigeria. I'm very pleased and honored to introduce our panel of distinguished speakers. And for time reasons, I will not read their full bios, but simply introduce them by name, and my colleagues will put the bios in the chat so that you can read them. I would like to start with Princess Jumai Idoniji, who is the Special Assistant Technical to the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Then we have Harry Obuche Obe, who is the Director, Women and Children Department of the National Human Rights Commission. Harry is the only man on this panel, and because of that, you know, he is a very welcome speaker today, and I'm sure, Harry, you're a very popular speaker in general about this topic. Thank you for being here. And then lastly, we have Priscilla Usiabaifo, who is the founder and executive director of Braveheart Initiative for Youth and Women, a feminist organization in promoting young people's sexual and reproductive health and advancing women's rights in Nigeria. Thank you very much for our speakers to be here. Let's jump right into the discussion, and let's start with Princess Jumai. Princess Jumai, can you tell us what are some of the trends on gender-based violence that you are currently seeing in Nigeria?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My internet connection is a bit unstable, so I may have to turn off the video so that it's not interrupted. If that's okay, I'll just quickly turn off the video and then okay.
Yes, please. Thank you. That's a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe anyone should turn off their videos who have them on.
So thank you again for your question. Your question was, what are the trends of gender-based violence in Nigeria at this time? And I want to quickly say that gender-based violence has been something that has been part of our society, but with the COVID-19 pandemic that took its toll on the country in the year 2020, as with other global economies, the trends of gender-based violence in Nigeria range from sexual violence, physical violence, emotional and psychological violence, child marriage, femicide, trafficking, female genital mutilation, domestic violence, rape, incest, intimate partner violence. This was as a result of the lockdown measures that occurred in the country, and the partners were all locked down, children were locked down within their homes and nowhere to go. So it was more like giving the perpetrators an opportunity to reinforce the violence that their victims were already undergoing. So there was an increase in the trends and patterns that were witnessed. And you recall that we also had a lot of cases where there was an outcry where a young girl, especially in Edo State, was murdered, raped and murdered in the church. We had some just around the corner of their homes. They were also murdered. And so there was a hue and cry around the gender-based violence at that time. And the society was a bit shaken. And for the first time, it was like this was happening, but this has been something that's always been with us in the country.
Thank you so much, Princess Jumai. Priscilla, I'd love to hear your perspective. Have you seen some of the similar trends, and is there anything you can add to what Princess Jumai has just explained? What about some of the regional differences across the states in Nigeria?
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to join you all here this afternoon. As we know, sexual and gender-based violence cut across different classifications. There are sexual harassment, sexual exploitation, there's attempted rape, there's rape itself, gang rape, incestuous rapes, indecent assaults, stalking, physical assault, gang beating, attempted murder, spousal threats, intimate partner threats, and even assault, spousal abandonment, spousal abduction, female trafficking, denial of child, denial of paternity, denial of pregnancy, neglected pregnancy, and a whole lot of types of sexual and gender-based violence that is being experienced by different classification of survivors. Although we know that most of the victims are survivors so far from the reports in Nigeria are female, we also have reports of men, both the boy child and adult male, who have also been victim. And it cuts across every regions, from the south-south to the southeast, to the southwest, to northwest, to northeast and north central parts of Nigeria. The 6 geopolitical zones have all reported. When you look at the national database of the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, and also the reports that we have from the NAPTIP website and individual reports that other organizations have published, we have also seen that incidents of sexual and gender-based violence cut across both rural and urban communities. I work from a rural community, and we've been bringing a lot of reports, but when you also go to the police for investigation, you discover that they also receive significant number of incidents across all levels. Although those are the rural communities still remain more undocumented because of the situation within those environs. For the trend, I would say one significant change that have happened, and it's a negative change, not positive, is the fact that sexual and gender-based violence has captured during the Beijing conference almost 30 years ago, has now evolved into more of cybercrime. We didn't used to have as much of cyber issues as we had in the past. So, and a lot is happening within the internet space, a lot of stalking is happening, and a lot of violence is happening within that space that is not yet checked, and our laws have also not evolved well to address those kind of issues that are coming up in recent times.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. This is a very good point. And as a matter of fact, the rise in cyber gender-based violence is also something that we have seen in Senegal during our data collection there. And so when I hear about these trends that you have just been sharing, they seem to be Nigeria does not seem to be an exception in terms of the types of violence that are rampant right now. But when you look at the broader West African region, it does seem that there are some types of violence that are particularly high in comparison in Nigeria. For example, it seems that sexual violence has drastically increased in the last decade in Nigeria, whereas in countries like Senegal, or even countries that have in the past seen exceedingly high levels, Sierra Leone or Liberia, the trend is going more downwards. Is there anything that any of you can add in terms of why is this such, are these levels in Nigeria exceptionally higher maybe than in other countries?
I wouldn't really say that the incidences are increasing. I'm always very careful when you have higher records. It's also about the work that have been done in Nigeria as a country in the past 10 years. There's a lot of sensitization going on within the families, within household, within communities, and the society at large. In the past 10 years, we've had better enabling laws. In fact, let me say in the past 3 years, we've had more states pass the child rights laws. We've had more states not only pass, but also implementing the violence against person prohibition laws, which is the VAP. So with an improved enabling or policy environment, we've also seen these laws take place, and that has translated to the number or increase in numbers that we have from Nigeria, as well as other regions that you may be seeing that trend happening for us.
Thank you, Priscilla. That's a very good point. So in fact, there could be a more conscientious reporting now in Nigeria of these issues because of all the advances that have been made in legislation and in implementation of that legislation. That's a very good point.
Let me just add that the enabling environment created that all the states are now having zero tolerance to gender-based violence. has also enabled reporting at all levels. So you see more families talking about it. And then there's one point I forgot to mention was the recent form of violence which we have experienced are those that have reared their heads with the cases of insurgency and continuous conflict in the Northeast, with activities of banditry. And you are aware we've had a lot of banditry issues that have caused a lot of insecurities in our space, where women can not even go to the farms and without being adopted and being raped and asked for ransom before they are released. So that has also brought about a lot of insecurity in the food sector. And we, like Priscilla mentioned, the trend we're even seeing is because the environment is not right. And then young boys who were quiet about being raped, young men also who were quiet about being raped, they are now speaking out because they do believe that the society will rise up to also defend them. So there's a lot of awareness going up, and that's why we're seeing more reported cases around the country at this time.
Thank you, Princess. Yes, that's an important point to add. Probably the type of conflicts that Nigeria is seeing are also further adding to the increase that is now increasingly reported also. Great. So we're looking. I mean, we're looking at a quite grim picture actually when we're looking at just hearing the list of all these different types of violence that exist. Let's look at the response. What are currently stakeholders doing to respond to the problem? Priscilla, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
All right. First, I think I would like to start with the policymakers. We've talked a lot about all the efforts that have started both at the federal level, from the National Assembly to specifically the Edo State House of Assembly, and the role that the First Ladies have played. I really have to commend the Nigerian Governors' Wise Forum and the efforts they've put in to ensure that these legislations happened at the state level, which we are saying that it's been translated into implementation and improved justice for all of us. I want to quickly move to the police. I have worked with the police for about 13 years, and I can boastfully say that I've seen significant and commendable improvement from the way that policing is done, especially using Edo State as an example. We used to have terrible experiences with the police, but in the past 5 years, the police have not just risen to the occasion, they are better educated now. They are more equipped. We identified a major gap with the police, which was logistics support, and we got funders, the Open Society Initiative for West Africa and Ford Foundation, and other funders who supported our efforts in partnering with the police to address their logistics challenges. And as soon as we did that, over 60% of our issues were resolved. And we needed to now begin to focus on training and retaining of those that have been trained. Excuse me. Another thing that happened with the police is that we've discovered that the police now also partner with the traditional justice actors, such as the local vigilantes, and that is commendable.
Priscilla, you went on mute.
I was done. I thought maybe others were speaking, and I'll continue.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Excellent comments, and thank you so much for. That's a very encouraging to hear that the police has been making so much progress. Harry, I'd like to ask you, what is the National Human Rights Commission doing to respond to the problem of GBV?
Thank you very much. Let me just use the opportunity to say I'm happy to be the only male panelist around, but I'll be speaking from my recognition as a he for she, because this issue weighs more against women in terms of the expression of GBV in our community. Having said that, we started by recognizing SGBV as a serious human rights issue. And so we started by sensitizing our staff on the need to focus especially on the trend of gender-based violence in our country. And then we decided to approach it from a more institutionalized point of view, leveraging on a very wide and robust legal mandate of the Commission. So what the first thing we did was to ensure that our states across the 36 states, our offices in the 36 states of the Federation created a desk on gender-based violence so that we have a specific focus for documentation and response to those issues. And then we also sensitize the general public by declaring some form of emergency on sexual and gender-based violence at the onset of COVID, when we noticed that the trend had gone up, that the reportage had gone, also advised government to deal with the issue. This actually led to the declaration of SGBV as an emergency in Nigeria by the president, and then the governors forum, and of course, the governors' wives as well. So we were able to have a better documentation on the issue of SGBV, and we also looked at the mandate of the Commission to approach the accountability for SGBV from a quasi-judicial mandate of the Commission. What this means is that the law provides that whatever decision or recommendation the Commission makes is enforceable as a decision of a high court, either a federal high court or any state high court. So the Commission set up a panel, a special panel on sexual and gender-based violence that sat across the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria. And by that, we're able to have better insight on the complexities of the issues of sexual and gender-based violence. We sensitized the people. We were able to also give recommendations and then have those recommendations implemented by state governors and also by federal government. And we also saw a lot of increase in terms of policy environment. There are a lot of policies, administrative policies that stakeholders started putting in place as a result of advisory given by the Commission. Then we have also a dedicated data collection system. We noticed that as at last year, we had an increased number of data collection to the tune of almost 158,000 cases of SGBV alone at the Commission. And then we worked closely with other stakeholders to ensure that we have a national approach to tackling the issues of SGBV. Then because of the advantages that came with the onset of COVID, I called it advantages because we were able to leverage on the opportunities provided by ICT to create a platform of intervention where people can stay in the comfort of their homes and offices on issues of SGBV. So we created web-based applications where people can report SGBV, and then we connected responders to the victims or the complainants for the purpose of response. So we created what we call the OnSub platform. The OnSub platform is specially focused on issues of SGBV, harvesting all complaints on the SGBV. Then we onboarded responders from across Nigeria, and there they meet. We created a handshake between the complainants and the responders, and we have a lot of success stories in this particular respect. Then we also made it known to the law enforcement personnel that as much as they may want to see this issue of SGB as a domestic issue or human or family issue, there's a criminal connotation to it that must be pursued to its logical conclusion. And so the Commission, activating its supervisory mandate, ensure that the police and other law enforcement personnel are trained specifically on how to handle issues of SGBV. And then we also ensure that the criminal angle to it is also pursued to the logical conclusion. But we noticed that the humanitarian or the social protection component of dealing with issues of SGBV was a bit shaky because the infrastructure to dealing with victims of SGBV was not so much in place. And I'm speaking to issues of shelter, because the first line protocol in dealing with issues of violence is removing the victim from the violating environment and taking the victim to a more protected environment before you now focus on issues of accountability. But over time, because of the sensitization and publicity that has come up as a result of the Commission's work with other stakeholders in Nigeria, we are increasingly providing the protective space for the victims of SGBV. And I think it's a very healthy development.
This is really wonderful to hear and very encouraging, all these efforts that the Commission is undertaking. Princess Jumai, how has the Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development responded to the problem?
Thank you so much. The Federal Ministry of Women Affairs is the national for the advancement of the well-being. And first and foremost, the issue in that violence in Nigeria. One thing that was lacking was the enabling environment to help like all these issues. So the first thing the Honorable Minister did, and we must give credit to this woman who in her wisdom took this issue because it was a national emergency.
Princess Jumai, can you move? Is there any way you can move closer to the microphone, or maybe it's just like me? I cannot hear you very well.
Can you hear me now? Is it
Yes,
better?
much better. Yes.
Okay. So I was saying that the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs is a national machinery for the advancement and protection of the well-being of women and children in Nigeria. And so we must give it to the leadership of the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs at this time, led by one woman, a champion, an advocate, who single-handedly took it upon herself to ensure that an enabling environment is created for advocating these issues. And so at the peak of the outcry of heightened issues around gender-based violence, she went to the Federal Executive Council with the issues to say, we cannot sit back and allow our nation to be ridiculed. And what happened? The Federal Executive Council immediately agreed with her and declared a state of emergency against gender-based violence in June 2020 under the leadership of Mr. President. As if that was not enough, she still sought audience with all the 36 state governors, and they also responded positively, unanimously declaring a state of emergency against gender-based violence in Nigeria. And for this, she continued to champion the issues of gender-based violence, leading to the setting up of a situation room that has an electronic dashboard where you can see state-by-state reportage of gender-based violence. And that has enabled the country to have, for the first time, harmonized data on gender-based violence. This was a project supported by UNDP under the Spotlight Initiative and was launched by the Deputy Secretary General of the UN in November 2020. And that was the beginning of it, because she now went on heightened advocacy, high-level targeted advocacy at the states. As at the time she assumed office in August 2019, we had only 23 states that had domesticated the Child Rights Act. Don't forget that Nigeria is such that for you to have enabling laws, whatever is done at the federal has to be domesticated at the state level. And so today we are celebrating 31 states that have domesticated the Child Rights Act. And for the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, as at 2019, we also had 13 states, but today we have 34 states that have domesticated the Child Rights Act. And so it is for us something that is worth celebrating. And how was this accomplished? She took the he for she advocacy. I hear Harry is calling himself a he for she champion. Yes, he is one of them. But this is advocacy at the topmost level, where the governors, when they are able to do something that is related to creating or condemning GBV, the minister goes there to say, oh, you are our champion, you are an ambassador, and they are so decorated with the he for she badge, and it spurs them to do more for women and children in the state. And so that's what the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs is doing, and working with partners, because we cannot claim that we're doing it all by ourselves. We're working with partners, civil society organizations, the National Human Rights Commission, and all the other MDAs that have that are working closely with the Ministry of Women Affairs. And one important milestone also that was achieved is the inauguration of an interministerial gender-based violence management committee to provide a synchronized approach to address all forms of violence against women and children in the country. With directives from the president, it is chaired by the Honorable Minister of Justice and co-chaired by the Minister of Women Affairs. And I also want to say that the beautiful synergy we're seeing with the police today is such that was driven by the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs at the highest level, and then the Inspector General of Police was directed to immediately deal with perpetrators of gender-based violence without recourse to whoever you are in the society. And so today we have an enabling environment in Nigeria, and we are celebrating the fact that Nigeria is responsive to gender-based violence.
Thank you so much, Princess Tumai. Very important point. I do want to give it back to Priscilla because I think she was cut off. Priscilla, do you have anything to add on the current response? And if not, why don't you tell us a little bit? I mean, this has all been very encouraging to hear, but are there still gaps in the current response? And where do you see opportunities for improvement?
Just to ride on the fact that, or to stress the fact that we need to understand that the work that the police is doing is very essential to addressing issues of sexual and gender-based violence. And the fact that they have begun to collaborate with the traditional actors and our traditional leaders. SGBV, as we know, is an offshoot of gender inequalities. And it's an expression of the patriarchal society that we live in. When we are able to address those social cultural norms that fuel sexual and gender-based violence and other general human rights violations, then we'll better appreciate the work that we are doing. For most of us that are civil society organizations, especially organizations like Brave Hearts, who operate in rural areas, we have been able to find out that most of the survivors and victims necessarily may not speak to the police, but they do speak. We have this mantra within the CSO space where you say you want to teach survivors to break the silence. But from experience in the field, we realize that the survivors have always been speaking. But the question is, who have they been speaking with? They talk to their mothers, they talk to their fathers, they talk to their siblings, and they talk with their friends. So there's been a whole network of persons who were aware of these violations that have been happening. But the question is, these bystanders, what have been their role over the years? And that is why it's very instrumental that you start from the household level to begin to educate on why this kind of reports needs to get to the police. And for the police to begin to look at the referral or response pathway. So when you identify a particular community and you see the channels of reporting, if, for instance, there continue to be an increased number of, let's say, wife battery, for instance, I don't want to even use sexual assault. If we have an increased number of wife battery in a particular community, who continues to go to the palace where there are traditional leaders, The palace, as we also know, is also patriarchal, is made up of men who are the custodians of that community. And they decide to tell the women to go back to their husband, marriage is forever, divorce is not permitted, and and that cycle continues. So these women are actually speaking up, but they are not getting justice. And that is why it is very important that you look at it as a whole chain. You look at, I tell people that is a pathway. So when you understand the entire referral systems and the response mechanism that is in place, then you appreciate every actors. That leads me to the health personnel. Why do we need the health personnel? For sexual assaults, the medical report is one of the most vital documents for prosecution. Even for physical assaults, you need a medical report from a health personnel to prove that this assault has taken place. When you're able to strengthen the linkages for provisions, service provisions for survivors, because today's message, our topic is survivor-centered approach. You can have different approaches to addressing SGBV, but when you look at it from the point of the survivor, and you see that the survivor's number one priority, as at the time that this violation have taken place, is to be alive. And then you begin to look at, how do I keep her alive? So she needs medical attention as quickly as possible. Emergency services, even preventive services for sexual assaults. So that is why it is very important that the police, the local systems, the health structures, they work in harmony. Another actor I want to mention, yes, for plus and also for challenges, are the funders. COVID happened. We had the shadow pandemic. So while we are dealing with the crisis of COVID-19, we also had another crisis of violence against women. We wouldn't say that COVID brought it. No, violence against women has always been there, even before COVID. What happened was that it became what? It became more obvious. And as at then, we had responsible funders who had to rise to the occasion. From the Open Society Initiative to Ford Foundation to MacArthur. And I want to give a lot of kudos to the British Council in Nigeria. They did so much work across all sectors, from the justice sector to the health sector, establishment of the sexual assault referral centers across the different states. They had almost 12 to 13 or even 15 sexual assault referral centers. These are major milestones that we just cannot ignore. And most of these changes happened. We also would like to talk about the EU Spotlight Fund that was, implemented in partnership by CSOs and, government agencies in various states, and the results that they achieved. So it was very strategic for funders to see a need and decide to move resources to solve the need at that particular point in time. Now, we would like to give kudos to CSOs, civil society organizations, NGOs that are sexual and gender-based focused, like Brave Heart Initiative. We work under a very dangerous terrain. Our lives, I keep asking people, who defend the human rights defenders? You heard about the National Human Rights Commission outline different strategies, different programs, projects, and activities that they had to implement. At our own risk, Brave Heart, for instance, have lost staff. We've lost survivors in our work. And of recent, the office was boggled. Right in my community, we were attacked in the middle of the night. Robbers came, looted the entire office. And in the midst of all this, we continue to do our work on a daily basis to be there for our survivors. And one gap that I've discovered happening among almost all of us is funding. Yes, you keep looking at organizations that do this work and you feel, oh, they don't have institutional requirements to access certain funds. So it's very important that we begin to look at how to leverage some of the funds. Are there partnerships that could exist with community-based organizations? Are there partnership and mentoring, institutional mentoring that could exist with young women-led organization or young people-led organizations? Because you can't compare an organization that has been in existence for 25 years with a young organization who is 5 years old, have a lot of innovative ideas. They are creative, they can use digital media, but they don't have the structures that they need to put in place. Can there be a hand-holding processes? We are not saying that you should break the rules. Yes, we need certain minimum standard to be there for resources to come. And I also want us to begin to look at resources beyond finance. There can be support, there can be technical expertise that could be shared with some of these other organizations. There can be material support. For instance, the Center for Democracy and Development in Nigeria provided almost 30% of the furnitures in Brevat. So those are some of the support you could give. So these are all areas we need to look at to begin to say, if we want to focus on survivors, how do survivors get timely services so that all of us are working effectively and efficiently to address issues of sexual and gender-based violence in Nigeria?
Thank you very much, Priscilla. This was a very convincing argumentation. I want to move. So we've seen, when you look regionally, what we've seen is that there's often a bit of a gap also of the response that's coming from the urban centers and in the rural areas. And we've heard earlier that the violence in the rural areas is often higher also. So that could be related. We've also seen that often the response is not coordinated on the regional level, meaning that, you know, so we're looking at some of the violence that you have mentioned in the beginning. I think it was Princess Jumai who talked about the conflict in the Northeast. Some of this is regional violence that's affecting women in cross-border areas. And there are also a lot of survivors who are changing countries, you know, after they have experienced violence. So there really seems to be an importance also for a regional approach. I want to give the microphone to Harry and Princess Jumai. When we're thinking about recommendations to the police, and I'm now particularly thinking about this gap between local and urban response, so rural and urban response. Can you talk a little bit about what your key recommendations would be for police and also for civil society, so that we can continue to prevent and reduce gender-based violence?
Okay, thank you, Deborah once more. Thank you, Priscilla, for taking time to expatiate what you're already doing. So for me, I would say that already we're working with the civil society organizations, because they are like the foot soldiers for the ministry, because most of the issues actually happen at the rural areas. And so for us at the urban area, the basic thing we usually do is advocacy and support. And to the police, I want to say one of the biggest challenges is keeping the victims or the survivors without listening to them, because the time they spend at the police station is usually so long and they're already traumatized and they're looking for people to give them succor, and the cases are dragging. And between the time they experience this a rape or whatever form of violence, all they are looking for is a shoulder to cry on. And then first they are told to go to the hospital immediately, and the doctors are not there to attend to them. And even if they are there, they begin to subject them to further psychological trauma. So for me, as a parent whose child has also suffered such a situation, I would say that they should empathize and spend less time in dragging those victims who are already traumatized from being further traumatized by the time spent in hearing their cases. And when the perpetrators are there and they are arrested, they should immediately try them. I'm happy to note that some of the states in Nigeria are already doing that. They're not wasting time. Once the cases are reported, they immediately try them through the special courts that had been advocated. And that is what we're seeing now. So I would recommend, again, that the police and the health workers, who are the first
Juma, you have broken up. Maybe we can hand the microphone to Harry.
No,
Harry,
it's okay. It's the host that muted me. I've unmuted again.
I see.
So in essence, I'll just say that the police and the health workers who are in charge of taking reports or examining victims or survivors, when they come to them, they should reduce the time spent. They should empathize what they're going through. They should put the survivors at the center of whatever they're doing. They should put themselves in their positions so that they can feel what these people are going through, and so that we can have a sane society.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. I do want to give Harry the opportunity to also say something about this. And then please, all the participants, feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat. We will be able to do a quick Q&A. We have maybe 2 more questions to go through, and then we'll get there. So Harry, please, any thoughts on the recommendations for police and civil society?
Thank you very much. I would like to start from where Princess Juma stopped. That is that the police and other responders have to put the survivors in the center of their response. And then particularly to the police, what we usually tell them during trainings is that they are first and foremost a human rights defender. And so when a victim or a survivor comes to them with regard to SGBV, they should know that they are there to protect the rights of the victim or the survivor. So once they have that approach, they are moved a bit from the traditional approach to fighting crime to being a protection worker. You know, so once they change that psyche, and then we also let them know that issues of LGBTQ has very deep roots in culture and tradition of the people, and that is why we hear sometimes complaints from survivors that when they get to the police, they will say, go and settle with your husband or go and settle with the violator, because they expect that these things can be handled in a cultural or traditional way. But the police, as a law enforcement officer, must know that there is a difference between traditional way of handling things and criminal accountability as defined with
Harry, I think we also lost you now.
They have to understand the line. Sorry, I'm using my phones now. So they need to understand the difference between culture, tradition, and strict legal implementation. Then for other responders, we should, knowing the psychology of the survivors, move away a bit or use, together with the strict judicial process, quasi-judicial processes that tends to emphasize the rights of survivors, or there are more survivor centers, then in addition to the strict criminal accountability process through the courts. And by this, I mean, let us use agencies that have quasi-judicial powers, like the Human Rights Commission, like the Public Complaints Commission, and other agencies that can use less formal judicial process. That way, they will focus more on the rights and the interests of survivors, and then protect these survivors more. Then I'd like to also commend the initiative of the Honorable Minister for Women Affairs on identifying the role of men. I think involvement of more men in the fight against LGBTQ will actually go a long way to address the issues in Nigeria. So the he for she initiative should be expanded and involve more men that are quite understanding in terms of what the issues are, so that both the survivor and the perpetrator can actually be educated on the implication of their actions. And that way we will have a more wholesome approach to issues of SGBV in Nigeria, and we'll be able to get better results.
Thank you so much, Harry. Thank you for really putting the survivor-centered approach at the center of the discussion and mentioning some of the dimensions like the psychological support to the victims. It's certainly something during our work under this project we have seen also in Senegal, that there was really still a gap in addressing the psychological needs of the victims and truly moving to an approach that respects their rights and then also their needs and wishes. time is running short, but I do want to come to the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, which is an important legislation and a very particular, unique legislation in Nigeria. Priscilla, would you like to tell us a little bit about this act and what it brings to the response to GBV in Nigeria?
Edo State is very fortunate to be one of the states that have not only passed the law, we are also implementing the law, which is good. So this is not one of those tick the box acts of government. In Edo, the law is being implemented. We have about 13 cases from my organization alone in courts, which are being tried using the VAP law. We've not gotten any conviction yet, but we are looking forward towards it. One of the beauty of the VAP law for us is that it has expanded the definition of rape. It used to be very limited, penis to vagina. And you remember when we started, we talked about the trend in SGBV. For the sexual assault, we've seen more of oral sexual assault and anal rapes, which were not being captured by the criminal code that was being used. But with the VAP law, that is handled. Another major challenge we had, especially for an organization like Braveheart, for the record, we've successfully facilitated conviction of 23 sex offenders in 22 cases. These 22 cases, police investigated and prosecuted 21 of them, and they were successful. I mean, we won the cases in courts. So when I keep referring to the police and our partnership with them, in the first 10 cases, when you look at the judgment in courts, you are just going to be very angry with the criminal justice system in Nigeria. Why? They gave options of fine, and they were very meager punishment. They were not commensurate with the crimes that were committed. We had a 3-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted, and an option of fine of 150,000 naira was awarded by the courts as an option of fine. The fine was paid. The accused or the convict got back home, and the mother re-victimized the survivor and her family. So the VAP law in Edo State have helped us address that, because with the VAP law, there is no more option of fine. So that has been ruled out. And that is why it's such an important piece of legislation for us in Edo State. It also talked about coordination mechanism. So now we know that the Ministry of Women Affairs, working in partnership with the Ministry of Justice and some other actors, have what we call a gender-based violence committee. The state also have a technical working group on addressing violence, sexual and gender-based violence, and they are all embedded in the law. So there are provisions within the law to ensure that all the programmings are coordinated. So many other aspects of the law that's really been helpful. The sentencing is longer now. So not just 5 years, 3 years and 2 months. Some of the sentences are as much as life imprisonment. So people know that with a higher sanction, then that should serve as a warning and also help us to curb impunity of sexual predators in our states.
Thank you, Priscilla. Yes, and I think the law also introduces the idea of compensation to the victims, which is really very innovative and new to in the region also, I think. Great. So the time is officially over, but we started a bit late, and I would love to take a few questions. You're more than welcome to go, of course, if you have other appointments. But if not, please stay with us for a question. I see, for example, a very good comment here that the police is not the only key actor in implementing the service-centered approach. Hospitals and judiciary should be engaged. Thank you so much, Kemi, for adding this. Absolutely, this is certainly a very holistic effort that needs to happen across all sectors in the government, civil society, private sector also. The more we can be to help the victims, the better, and we have to coordinate well. So thanks for bringing that up. I also see a question here on the survivor-centered approach is key to the police response and prevention of SGBV is not in doubt. Can the panelists discuss the challenges police experience in implementing the survivor-centered approach? Have any of you worked close enough with the police so that you can share some insights on what the challenges are?
Okay, I think I'll give it a shot. I want to storify it. So my name is Priscilla. I approach Igara Police Division. For context, it is important that we know that Igara, Akoko Edo, is one of the 18 local government areas in Edo State. Akoko Edo is made up of 46 communities. These 46 communities have 3 police divisions: Igara Police Division, Ososo Police Division, and Ibilo Police Division, to provide services for 46 communities. It's very important that we take note of the ratio of police station versus the communities and the population. Also to note is that this same local government that is made up of 46 communities has only 3 medical doctors. 2 of them are within the general hospitals, General Hospital Igara, General Hospital Ibilo, and the 3rd doctor is with the Primary Healthcare Development Agency. The 3rd doctor also performs administrative functions. So he has a lot of civil service rules work to do. So it's just those 2 that you can really rely on to provide services. We don't even have guarantee that any of these doctors will stay with us till the end of December, because there's been a lot of capital flights of doctors and other health personnel in Nigeria, which we have refused to address, because we must know the implication for health care and service delivery in Nigeria for every doctor that relocates out of this country. The investment in the health sector has just been pathetic. We need to do more. For police, when I step into Igara police station to report a case of gender-based violence, let's assume that I've just been raped. The first thing the police will need to do is to ask for a summary of what have happened. So he needs to document, or they say they are making an entry into their entry books. He gets that done. Ask me about where the incident happened. So which means they will need to visit the crime scene to verify or corroborate some of the things I've said. They might immediately go to the crime scene before they obtain statement. At another time, they might have taken a comprehensive statement before going to the crime scene. They don't really have a straight pattern to address this, depending on how the issue have happened. And if I'm able to prove that the suspect are still within the crime scene, sometimes the police also want to quickly, proactively go to make arrests so that they won't miss that opportunity. To go to the crime scene, police need transportation. Now, this is a division that probably has, let's say, 13 vehicles, and 11 have been parked for the past 5 years. They are non-functional. The 2 that are functional, one of them is a police van who is on the road on patrol, keeping the highway safe. There is only one in the police station as at the time of my reports, and there is no fuel in it. So they need to purchase fuel. So they reached out to me and they said, Priscilla, Shebi, you want case, in quotes. I have come that my right is violated, but I have been told I want case. And because I want case, then I need to provide support for the case to be facilitated. So I need to either get a vehicle for them to get to the crime scene or provide money for the fueling for them to get to the crime scene. So they get to the crime scene, they do maybe take pictures, do all what they are trained to do. They get back, I provide information about the suspects. So they need to go for arrest of the suspects. Another transportation logistics is needed. For your information, when you report cases to the police, either the divisional police officer or the divisional crime officer or any senior police officer appoints an IPO. IPO means investigating police officer. This police officer is charged with investigating your case. But when they instruct Deborah, for instance, to go handle Priscilla's case, all they tell Deborah to do is, Priscilla have reported a case. Go ahead and do the investigation. Deborah is not provided with any resources to do the investigation. And she cannot use her salary or her personal income to do that work. So she ends up getting back to me, who is the client, to request for logistic support to get her work done. And that is how those expenses begin to accumulate. When we are back that the suspect have been arrested, and we need to go to the hospital, and they need to issue a police medical request form. They may also charge you for the form, because they may tell you they have only one form left. They need to have a duplicate copy of the form to give to me to take to the hospital. So I am accompanied to the hospital, and by the time I get to the hospital, there are bills. The doctor needs to examine me. First, I need to get registered at the hospital. So in Nigeria, they call it a hospital card, issue hospital card. The hospital card is supposed to be 200 or 500, but because it is a police case, I am charged 2,000 or 5,000 for that particular form. I pay it, the doctor examines me. I also may need to pay for doctor's examination. Certain tests are required, STI screening, HIV, hepatitis, urinalysis or high vaginal swab may be done. They may also need to do a pregnancy test. All these medical screenings involve monies, which I also need to pay. Police is not going to cover my medical bills. So I pay for this, and then we get back to the doctor, and there are prescriptions. So there are certain medications I need to take, and I'm sent to the pharmacist where I need to pay for the drugs. When I'm done with all this, the doctor needs to produce a medical report. So the police comes back to pick up the medical report and is asked to pay for the medical report. The police doesn't have money to pay for medical reports. He gets back to me, who is the victim or the survivor, to bring out 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 as the case may be, to pay for the medical reports. I pay, and I get back to the police station. If it's a gang rape, they might have arrested one of the suspects, and they need the other 3. So which means repeated visits to the suspects' hideouts, houses, or wherever they may be. Police may also decide that they need community intelligence. So they need to engage vigilantes and hunters and other community actors within the communities who will work with them to apprehend these suspects. So expenses just continue to expand. When they are done with their investigation, within the the police system in Nigeria, all cases, especially when it is rape, are classified as high-level offenses. They cannot be concluded at the divisional level. For me, who live at Tigara, which is 4 hours away from the state headquarters, there needs to be a transportation of all of us involved, the survivor, the witnesses, the police, the suspects, to the police headquarters. In Edo State, the police headquarters is situated in Benin City. For the case to be transferred to Benin City, we have to hire a vehicle. We may need to pay up to 60,000 naira to get to Benin City with a vehicle that will take all of us. And when we get to Benin City, they start all over again, just like what Jumai said. The entire questions are asked again. A new investigating police officer is assigned at the state police headquarters. A new case file is opened, and then they also need to visit the crime scene. Another expense is to be borne. So
thank you so much, Priscilla. Priscilla, I think you've given us more detail than we really were expecting. Such a detailed, we've really understood, I think, the the administrative, logistical, bureaucratic obstacles that make the police response difficult in some cases. So thank you for shedding so much light on that. I do want to go to one other question that is important. That is the question, who defends the human rights defenders? I wonder whether Harry may have some thoughts to share on that.
I think the human rights defenders, first and foremost, need to come together, and work out a strategy of defending themselves first, and then making their collaborators or partners in the government, on the government side, realize that they are first and foremost human beings that have their rights to be protected, and that they need to be protected even within their workspace. And so organizations like the National Human Rights Commission has actually recognized that human rights defenders are also very vulnerable in their quest to providing succor to victims of human rights. And so we need to work closely. They need to work closely with accountability processes within the system to ensure that they are protected. And then in devising or coming up with programs, there has to be a provision for safety. It doesn't have to be monetary all the time, but there must be a clear pathway as to what to resort to, or what avenue to actually resort to when you need to be protected. And then we should have laws in place in the country that clearly speaks to protection of human rights defenders, because it has been noticed over time that they are actually highly vulnerable set of people, especially when it has to do with cases of SGBV, because the perpetrators will first and foremost want to silence not just the survivor or the victim, but whoever comes up to speak on their behalf. So human rights defenders in this context are highly vulnerable, and then the law must be strong enough to speak to their protection. So there's need for strong linkage or partnership with accountability processes within the system, like the National Human Rights Commission, and then the police need to be sensitized to this particular fact, that the human rights defenders are actually helping the police to do their work. And so it is a matter of self-interest for the police to ensure that the human rights defenders are protected in discharging their constitutional responsibilities. So there's need for synergy from all sides to ensure that human rights defenders are protected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry. And I see a lot of other comments that are really very useful, and that remind us to really keep in mind that the main purpose is to put the victim at the center, and whatever it is that the response entails, if it doesn't correspond to the rights and needs of the victims, it's probably not the right response, and we shouldn't invest in it. And then also the need for prevention, the need for communal approaches, and some best practice models such as the SAC in Oyo State. This is all really useful. So thank you for contributing so much to the discussion. With this, I think I'd like to close to let you all get on with your days. I would like to thank our speakers really very much. Thank you for so many rich and stimulating contributions to this topic that helped us to get a much better sense of what is happening on GBV and the police in Nigeria. I'd also like to thank the participants who've showed up in such big numbers and who have contributed so actively to the chat. And of course, our partners, Partner West Africa Nigeria and Partners West Africa Senegal, and Ford Foundation, whose support is making this event possible today. As I said before, we have ended the first phase of the project. In the second phase, we at PartnersGlobal will now producing a report that provides a broader regional perspective on the issue that will also be published. If you're interested in remaining updated on our efforts, potentially participate also in the review of this regional report, please send an email to the addresses that my colleagues will put in the chat here, and we'll be very happy to keep you posted on what we're doing. And then finally, we'd also like to ask you to fill out an evaluation form. We'll send it in a few hours. And I don't know how many of you have attended our last webinar on Senegal also. But if you can take the evaluation will be on both, and we'd really appreciate if you could take some time and answer. It will just be a very few questions, should not take more than a couple of minutes, but that really helps us improve our programming and the quality of our events. Very good. So thank you all so much, and we hope to have more opportunities to exchange with you on this important topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Hi, Mr.